All right. Tres, dos, uno. Welcome to episode 16 of Ty's Train Talking with My Dad. This is the week of April 7th, 2025. I'm Ty and recording here in beautiful Khare, Nepal, 4,880 meters above sea level. That's about 16,000 feet for all of my imperial friends out there. And here, as always, literally across the oceans on the other side of the world, back in Massachusetts with my co-host and father, Tim Anders. Great to see you, Mr. C, for another look at training and life ahead of Project Himalaya. Quick plug before we dive into it this week. If you missed it last week, we have launched our book project, Run Monoslew. You can now pre-order that officially via Indiegogo. That's that's where we're housing all of our pre-order stuff. Check that out. We'll have links wherever you're consuming this, YouTube, podcast, whatever it is. So you can pre-order the book. You can also support with some cooler packages that include, one-of-a-kind artifacts and all this other cool stuff from this whole Run Everest project. So check that out. It'll be on Indiegogo, and we'll have links to wherever you are watching or listening. Anyways, it's been a great first week up here. Mr. C, like I said, great to see you. How have you been? How's your week back home?
Great to see you, and this is amazing that we can do this with you in the middle of nowhere and 5,000 meters up or 4,500 meters up, wherever you are. So
Yep.
some things about the modern world are quite amazing. Things are fine
It's
here.
true.
We've been a little under the weather the last couple of days, but I'm feeling much better today. So weekend got kind of wiped out, but doing better today.
Excellent. Glad to hear it.
So if I snuffle a bit and grab for a tissue once in a while, that's why.
We'll forgive you.
Anyway, yep, other than that, great here. So let's get started and take us through the numbers and totals for the week.
Yeah, so this is my first full week here in Khare. So every single day was up here. And like we talked about last time, though, if you listened last week, it was an asynchronous episode where Mr. C and I kind of recorded our own individual pieces, and then our amazing editors, Jason and Kat Anderson, piecemealed that together for you guys. So anyways, this was a first full week, 90 kilometers, 89 kilometers, 39 and a half hours of training time, and just under 10,000 meters of vert. So one of the things we talked about last week was this idea of, some of the numbers actually coming down just because every single thing we do here is basically 5,000 meters or above. And also because there's no cheating on the vert anymore. There's no treadmills. There's no cable car to take down. So every meter that I go up, I have to come back down. And so I'm being very, very conservative with that in terms of how I approach vert. So that vert number, I think it was like, 15, 16, 17,000 meters in keto.
Yes.
10,000, I think, which is honestly probably about the same if you looked at what I was doing like up and down. So I'm still very, very stoked with where I am. It's like pretty much perfect. And like the training time is really the big thing.
You're only doing one Everest a week now instead of two.
Exactly. Yep.
But you're doing it starting at 5,000 meters. So
Yeah. It's a lot of 5,000 to 6,500 meters here.
I can't imagine it. Okay. Anything else before we jump into questions?
No, let's dive in. We got a bunch to go through here, and I'm stoked to talk about Khare and how things have been going here.
Okay. Right. So since we did have challenges last week and ended up doing things asynchronously, this is our first live podcast since you've gotten to the Himalaya and to Nepal. How are you feeling now that you've finished your first week, and are you settled in, and how's it going in Khare?
Yeah, it's going great. I feel like even within the first few days, I had really kind of developed a rhythm and routine here. It's definitely a little bit remote, a little bit less comfortable than, my apartment in Quito. And we'll kind of dive into that stuff, some of the differences in training and just life in general. But yeah, it's been really good, honestly. Last time we talked about the travel here, and that was a, very, very long trip. But I think now those first few days, I really gave myself the space to, set up my living space, set up my exercise space, figure out where I'm going to train every day, even just little things like, it's really cold here and how do I deal with that and what layers to wear and stuff like that. So I think it's been really good. And now I feel very much at home here. I think I'm a creature of habit and a creature of routine. And I love just installing myself in a place, whether it's here in Khare or Quito or, Peru, wherever it is. And I feel now like I've actually got a little home base and got a good routine going.
Great. And just for me and for everybody who might be listening, can you tell us sort of broadly where Khare is?
Yeah, sure. I've actually got a map on my wall right behind me if you're watching.
There it is. Hard to
Basically,
see, though.
the Khumbu Valley is the famous valley where Mount Everest is at one end, and then it flows downhill towards lower Nepal and Kathmandu, and that's where most trekkers and hikers will go up that valley. Excuse me. So the where I am is basically one valley over from that. So we flew into the same town, which is called Lukla, which is basically the gateway to this whole region. It actually has a very small airport. You can, if you're like afraid of flying, don't go look up pictures of Lukla Airport. It's like the most terrifying place ever. But yeah, everybody flies into Lukla, and then from there you basically go straight up to go up the Khumbu and towards Everest and Everest Base Camp. The trekking and climbing route there. Or if you basically bang a right, you go up over a big mountain pass and then down into a valley to the east and then up there, and that's where Khare is. So as the crow flies, we're actually very close to Mount Everest. Like I see Mount Everest every day when I go up the mountain, assuming it's somewhat clear that I'm training on here. And it's probably only, I don't know, 10 miles, 15 miles away. But to get there from here, it's like one of those, the old Maine saying, like, you can't get there from here. Like,
Can't get there
it's
from here.
it's very complicated to get there. Like, you have to go over a really high technical mountain pass or all the way back to Lukla and then back up the other way, which is like 60 miles of trekking or something. So it's both very close and also very far away.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Thanks for that. So Monday, you mentioned that you began with better sleep, but still had not great sleep, especially the first half. So is your sleep better? Have you been adjusting to the altitude, and what other adjustments have you had to make to get to the point where you have a comfortable routine in Khare?
So I think that the altitude and sleep and stuff, I honestly think a lot of it is jet lag too. Cause like, I came very quickly up here. I was in your house in Massachusetts, and then I don't know, 48 or 72 hours later, I was here in Khare. So you have both the drastic change in elevation as well as it's almost 12 hours, I think 10 and a half hours of jet lag or something here. Honestly, I think it's probably more of the jet lag is what I was experiencing, that like kind of just fitful sleeping, which I'm sure you've experienced, Mr. C, in many trips to Europe and Asia for work and stuff. That's how I experience it mostly is, sometimes I'll be really tired and I'll fall asleep, but then I'll wake up after like 2 hours and just be like super awake in the middle of the night, which can be a little bit frustrating. And it's a very similar sensation to altitude issues when you're up high as well. And, it is a big jump, even going from where I was in Quito. It's basically 2,000 meters higher than that. So that's pretty significant. It's almost 7,000 feet. But still, I think, within a couple of days, I was sleeping very, very well through the night. I think I'm a pretty good traveler, and I think adjusting to jet lag is one of those things that you just kind of have to rip the Band-Aid off and, have your caffeine in the morning and your melatonin at night. And the body is pretty good at adjusting after that. But yeah, I think that's like once the sleep was good, then like everything else just kind of fell into place as it usually does for me. Definitely a big sleeper and fan of sleep. And so like when I'm not getting good sleep, I get really annoying and cranky probably. So like once that was just kind of like I had a few good nights of sleep under my belt, I was like, okay, everything is gonna be fine. And then yeah, to the second half of your question, like other adjustments, I think the big thing, I can't remember if we talk about this later. I don't want to, jump the gun here, but it's really cold here. Surprise. I'm looking out my window and there's snow everywhere. We just had a huge snowstorm. They came through, and I'm like in my parka here. I've got my little thermometer. It's currently 44 degrees in my bedroom, which is actually quite warm because we just had some afternoon sun. Like it's about 24 in the morning. So it's really cold, and
Yikes.
it really encourages morning procrastination is what I found, because we don't get direct sunlight. We're in a really steep valley until about like 8:30, 8:45 in the morning. So I have found like I'm a pretty early riser in general, so I wake up at 6 or 6:30, and then I just peepaw around for like 2.5 hours, like just whatever, reading or on my computer or like looking at the mountains, getting my stuff ready to go. And then like how's it 9 o'clock already? But part of it is just because it's really cold in the morning, and it's really nice to like sit in the little lodge where they have a fireplace and be able to be a little bit warmer before the sun comes up. So I think that's the biggest thing, honestly, has been dealing with temperature regulation. Again, then, yeah, once the sun comes up and you're up on the glacier, it's super hot. Like I'm in a t-shirt up on the mountain sometimes, even at 20,000 feet.
Wow. That's amazing.
So it's an
So
absolutely
the sun is
incredible.
so bright, it really
Yeah,
warms you up that much?
exactly. Yeah, it's so bright. The sun is so strong. And then the snow acts as a mirror, so you get it from both sides. It's like being in a big, it's like, have you seen those like metal water heaters that are shaped like a inverted dome? it's basically what you're standing on a glacier. It's just a big set of mirrors that are pointing at you. So yeah, dealing with temperature has been hard, and then like even you and I dealing today of electricity, we don't have any electricity right now. So I'm running all this stuff off my battery pack, including our internet and my laptop to record this. So fingers crossed that we have enough. So, little things that we take for granted, even in a place like Quito, having reliable electricity, temperature regulation, things like that. Those are things that, you get used to very quickly, but you do have to make accommodations for that.
So there's no heating in the cabins at all, even though you're in this big mountain that's always cold.
No, no, the only heating is there's a big common space where, people have meals and hang out and stuff like that. And that's what do you call it? Like a cast iron stove, basically, that they
Uh-huh.
use, yak dung and cardboard and things like that to burn, literally.
Wow. Okay. Remote is the word that comes to mind. Okay.
Yep.
So now, in the middle of this place where you don't even have heat, you do have satellite internet and you have an altitude generator and a bike. It just
Yep.
just blows my mind. But you've now had a full week with your altitude generator and your bike. So can you walk us through how it's working up there? And you've spent so much time and energy to use this both in Quito and now up here. Take us through how it's helping and what it is.
Yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. It's like one of those things where I'm like, don't even look at it, don't talk about it. It's like it's working and I
Don't
don't
jinx
want
it.
it. Like, don't jinx it exactly. So, right now, yeah. So it's like totally, totally outrageous and ridiculous. But yes, I managed to bring stationary bike up here, which I had on Manaslu as well, and I found it was a really, really helpful tool. So I brought that up again, and then yeah, the altitude generator mask setup is the new thing this year. And it's funny, I talked to Dawa, who's our guy on the ground here in Nepal. Dawa Steven Sherpa, he runs Asian Trekking. They do all of our logistics. And I talked to him about this, as well as Jim, my agent last year, as this like totally ridiculous idea of like, could we do that? Like, and then bring this thing up there and blah, blah, blah. And like, would it help? And like, could we maybe kind of pre-acclimate a little bit better so that instead of making more trips higher up on the mountain, which is more dangerous, we can do more stuff just like in our, in the lodge here. And always the issue in my mind was electricity. And that is the big thing up here as we're experiencing right now, as there's no electricity. Not exactly sure why, but yeah, there's no electricity right now. And all of the electricity, there's no grid up here for the most part. Everything is either solar or very small, uh, you know, like no, I wouldn't even use the word plants. Hydroelectric generators basically for a handful of buildings, which is what Khare is. Khare is, I don't know, a dozen buildings.
Uh-huh.
We have hydroelectric power here, and Jim, my agent Jim Corville had suggested, hey, let's get a diesel generator, or not even diesel, sorry, a petrol gasoline generator. So it's like the size of a briefcase. So we brought that up too, and we actually haven't even used that yet because long story short, it's not working well with the altitude machine. But the actual power of the lodge to power their things that they have in the common space, like the very first night I was there, I saw they had a microwave, and I'm like, oh wow, a microwave, that's got to draw at least like 800 watts. There's no way that they can power a microwave and I can't plug this thing in. And so I talked to them and I was like, hey guys, here's this thing, here's who I am, here's the point, like I'm happy to pay extra for the power I'm going to use, can we just try and see if this will work? And it worked. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, oh my God, I cannot believe this. I cannot believe this is working. So right now we have it set up where it's running just off of the building's electricity. We're not even using the generator we brought up here. And it's been working really well, knock on wood. I've been able to, push the altitude on the bike basically where I was in Quito. So I'm still at basically biking at Everest summit altitude around 9,000 meters every day for about an hour and a half. And yeah, I found very substantial adjustments to that, to my tolerance for that level of hypoxia over the last, even month now, doing some of it in keto and now a week or so of that here. And, I talked, I think a little bit last week, maybe I definitely talked with Connor about it of just, hey, like, did you feel like it made a difference when you got here? Cause I have gone up to 6,500 meters a couple of times. And 100% yes, like that was absolutely no problem. Whereas I think in the past, like having gone, for example, down to the Atacama Desert, where it's a similar transition of maybe going from keto 3,000 meters up to 6.5, And that really stung the first couple of times. And I felt this time there was just absolutely no problem. I felt completely fine. So that was really exciting to see. And, hopefully over the next week or two, we'll get the opportunity to get even higher on some other mountains, tease that a little bit, and we can talk about that next week. But yeah, definitely going to get a little bit higher before going to Everest, so we can kind of continually test how this is going. But so far, I'm very confident that it's a super important part of our preparation here, and I'm just incredibly happy that it's working right now.
Well, that's great to hear because we talked about the fact that there wasn't any way to really test it while you were in keto. And the proof of the pudding, as we say, is in the practice versus the theory. So now you've had a
Totally.
little practice, and so far the evidence is good. So that's great.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great. And we'll hope that the electricity is good enough and everything else knocking
Fingers
on
crossed. Yep.
everything we can knock on. Okay,
Yep.
Tuesday. So Tuesday was your first trip up to the summit of Mera, Mear. That's the mountain you're on, Mera Peak. Mera, is that how they say it? Mera Peak, sorry. Though it looks like you've been going pretty high on the mountain virtually every day. How do you decide whether you're going to go all the way to the summit or turn around?
I'm basically just doing everything by time. So it's funny. The times actually line up really well with what I was doing on Ruku in Ecuador, where it would take me about 2 hours to 2.5 hours to get to the summit of Ruku at Polichaski, and then it would take me, I don't know, 45 or 50 minutes to jog down to the cable car. And here, because the mountain is so much steeper, it's about the same. So I'll go up about 2.5 hours, and then when I come all the way back down, so I'm not skipping any of the descent, obviously, because again, there's no way to do that here. It still ends up taking me 3 to 3.5 hours, which is pretty much what I want to do. So it's really just at the end of the day, I want to have about 3 to 3.5 hours of time on my feet. And so I just go up to about usually somewhere between 2:15 and 2:30, and then I turn around. And depending on how quick I'm going, sometimes that gets me all the way to the summit. Sometimes it only gets me to like 6,000 if I'm really tired. But it's really just about timing. This is like
Okay.
we've talked about on Ruku as well. It's like there's no summit fever here at all for me. Like I've been to the summit of this mountain, and it's really a training environment for me right now. So if I go to 20 meters below the summit, but it's like that's where the timer runs out for today, like that's fine. There's no real huge draw. Like obviously it's cool to go tag a summit, but you know, it's really just it's a very beautiful and wonderful stairmaster to me. It's
Got
like the
it.
world's coolest treadmill.
Right. So it's an isolated training environment, as I recall, more than a particular mountain, away from Everest Base Camp, both because you liked the slightly lower altitude of the base camp, as I recall, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're about 500 meters lower than Everest Base Camp here, so which is a lot. I said we're about almost 500 meters lower than Everest Base Camp, which is a lot.
Right. So easier to sleep, a little colder, and not as much craziness going on. Okay, great. So you had your first structured workout day this week as well, with a long 4 minute, 1 minute fartlek. So how important is this kind of structured higher end workout? And do you approach those workouts differently than you did when you were doing them in keto over the past few months?
I think they're really, really important. I think it's one of the things that I've tried to do differently than my first couple of expeditions here, and certainly than other athletes that I've seen who have come to the mountains. Again, kind of going back to the whole conventional wisdom thing. I, again, really approach all this stuff the same way that I would a race, a trail race, a marathon, even anything like that. And, if you were going to race a marathon, if you're racing the Boston Marathon, which is next week or probably the day this podcast comes out, you wouldn't just stop doing your hard workouts a month before. That would be like a terrible idea, because I think you do get a really significant stimulus for that. And you have to, when you're up here, get a little bit creative. And I think the most important thing is listen to your body and make sure you're adapting recovery to those workouts. So, for example, I didn't do a real workout for the first, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 days that I was here, just because I knew I'm jet lagged. I've done a week of travel. I'm 2,000 meters higher than I've been. My body you're making a lot of like really profound physiological adaptations during that time and recovering just from the stress of all those other things. So I think that's the really big thing with the workouts is making sure that you're balancing, still getting that higher end stimulus while making sure you're recovering. And for me, that's literally like I get in bed at like 6:30 p.m. and I get out of bed at like 6:30 a.m. And I'm not sleeping that whole time. Like I'll sit there and I'll write and I'll read, but I'm horizontal for almost 12 hours every single day. And that's what my body needs. Like I don't set an alarm. It's just that's when I wake up and that's what I feel like I need. And yeah, I think being able to keep those workouts is a way to still feel like I'm like making gains, like my momentum is still positive. Like I'm not just riding, like I'm not coasting. I still feel like I'm getting stronger every single week, which is really good from a physiological perspective and also from a confidence perspective of just knowing, hey, like that was a really good workout, or hey, next week's workout is better than this one, like so you're still seeing those gains week to week. And then the last thing in terms of like how are they different from keto? I think the big thing is I obviously don't have a full gym here. So like I don't have the option to do treadmill workouts and stuff like that in the afternoon. So I've
Yep.
actually started doing, those double workouts where I'll do the morning session up on the mountain. And then in the afternoon, I'll actually just do it on the bike. So instead of just easy spinning, I'll do, some hard intervals. I actually just did that today on the bike as a way to still get that higher end stimulus. But again, I'm saving the legs a little bit and it's logistically, there's some things that we're adapting because they make sense from a physiological and a training perspective. And there's some things that we adjust because it's just you can't do that here in the Himalaya. Like you just have to do things differently. And that's one of them. Like usually the afternoons, like right now it was sunny for half an hour and now it's, dumping snow again. So the weather in the afternoon is usually not so good. So I generally do
Uh-huh.
all of my mountain stuff in the morning and then in the afternoon I'll be inside.
Okay, great. Okay, so now your heart rate. Let's talk about your heart rate because there does seem to be a fairly rapid adaptation and drop in your heart rate as you've been training this week. So by Sunday, your heart rate was only 97 for the approach section that had been almost 120 earlier in the week. So what does this quick adaptation mean about your current fitness and how your acclimatization is proceeding?
I think there's two things there. I think the first thing, and like someone actually commented on my Strava on one of my, which is Mr. C, Strava is, the running social media app, whatever.
Right,
And they were like,
right.
like basically, like, why aren't you training harder? Your heart rate is so low. It's like, I don't think anyone's ever told me to train harder. But so the first thing to say is that heart rate decreases with altitude. But your max heart rate and then all of your zones below that will kind of scale lower. Your resting heart rate will actually go up a little bit. So it basically narrows the bands of everything, but really mostly it's going down. So 120 here might be 130 or 135 in keto. 97 is really, really low. Um, to me, when I look at those two numbers, I don't actually think there's any real adaptation happening. I think what it actually shows is that I was really tired and worn down and jet lagged and like post travel at the beginning of the week. And so those numbers were actually artificially elevated. I think the really low numbers probably make a lot more sense. Like that approach is it's often like really slippery. It's a bunch of big boulders, and if there's fresh snow, it's really slippery. So it's just like it's hard to move quickly. Like it's I remember talking about this with Ryan Hall a couple weeks ago in keto of like so like sometimes when you're super super fit, it's like hard to get your body to like work in the right zone, especially if you're not doing something like running or whatever. Like scrambling on boulders is not like a super intense aerobic activity for me because it's just the technicality of the terrain is making me move too slow. So that's I think why that approach is often really low heart rate. And then like once I get onto the glacier, which is much easier terrain, it's just a ramp, then you see it jump back up. But yeah, I think the earlier in the week stuff, I doubt there's any real adaptation here because I think like I felt very fine, like pretty much fine acclimatization wise when I got here. So I don't think it's so much the altitude. I think it was just like those early days, the heart rate was a little elevated because my body's circadian rhythms are like, why are you working out in the middle of the night? And also like you've been on like 5 continents in the last like 48 hours, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And, I even experienced that fitness accommodation problem, as I'm reasonably fit for an old man and I have to work and the problem I have is I have so many like little minor injuries all the time from my
Yeah,
body
exactly.
basically falling apart that it's sometimes hard to get even into zone 2 for me because it hurts my knee or it hurts this or it hurts that. And I have to go faster because I'm fit enough that if I don't work harder, I just don't get my heart rate up that much. So
Yep.
yeah,
Checks
it's an
out.
interesting thing. I never thought about it that way, but that's quite interesting. Okay. So Thursday you talked about all the fresh snow covering the crevasses and you turned around at about 5,900 meters. So talk us through your risk assessment process on this mountain in these situations, especially because it's so remote and you're training by yourself. So make me feel a
Yeah.
little bit more comfortable.
I mean, I touched on this before. I guess I'll kind of reiterate. I think for me, I'm literally going up and down the same trail every single day here for a month. I have absolutely no qualms about turning around early. Like I'm 100% going up every day to get a specific training stimulus. There's the going up and getting the view, like I love that. It's a bonus. Going to the summit is beautiful. It's wonderful. It's special. It's a bonus. It's an extra thing. And my number one priority is I'm here to train. This is a job. This is why I'm here. And so that day, I got up to 5,900 and there's a section right above the high camp on the mountain around that point between like 5,800 and 6,000 where there were a bunch of crevasses. And usually this mountain, I mean, there's probably, I don't know, 20 people every single day going up and down this mountain, at least at this time of the year. So there's usually a very solid boot track, like all the way from the bottom to the top of the mountain. And today, or that day, whatever it was, last Thursday, it had just snowed and a lot of people summit super early in the morning. And so there was just no footprints at all. I had my GPX track, from the day before because I'm doing the exact same thing every single day. But even that, it's not that accurate to like the meter where it's like, oh, well, that meter could be, in a giant crevasse and this one could be totally fine. And I just found myself up there and I was like poking around with my trekking pole and I was like, this is stupid. It's a waste of my time. Like there's just no, like I'm not, my heart rate's going down. There's no point for me to do this from a training perspective. Like I can just go back up and down the mountain, right? Like I have this big giant ramp from about 5'2" to 5'9" that's completely safe. There's nothing scary there. And so that was a day where I was like, okay, fine. Like there's no footprints. I don't have a rope or anything. Like I don't have anyone with me. I'm alone. I'm just going to go back down. I'll just do laps up and down this piece and I'll still get a great training day. Like it's completely fine. So I think it's just separating out the like, you know, how most people normally would approach climbing a mountain, which is like, oh, we really want to get to the summit versus for me, it's like, oh, I really want to have 3 hours of zone 2 time on the mountain. That's really what matters.
Yep.
And if that involves going up and down 50 meters of the mountain because that's the only safe part today, like that's what I'm going to do because that's why I'm here. Like that's why I'm here at the end of the day.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay. I do feel better. So thank you. Okay. So on, I think it was Friday, you had a big plyometric and lift session, big cross
Mhm.
training session. So how are you balancing this need for strength work with the endurance training you're doing? And how does this compare or contrast with the work you were doing in Quito or even on Manaslu last year when you were training for that attempt?
I think it goes back to looking over like even the last couple of years at what has worked really well for me and what has made me feel both strong from a performance perspective as well as strong for like balanced and healthy as an athlete and being able to do some kind of lifting strength training and the plyometric stuff which was really I integrated that after my Achilles surgery as rehab and I've just kept that because it's felt like a really important part of my training. That is something that I've prioritized, and it's something I didn't do on Manaslu, and I felt like I wish I had. It takes a certain amount of setup, and this is one of the things when we talked at the very beginning about, getting into the routine, I spent a lot of time thinking about what are the tools that I'm going to need when I get to Khare to be able to do all this stuff, to be able to have a lift, to be able to do, even plyometric session. Like literally, I need to have space where I can jump around. I need to have a staircase, things like that. So, I think I put a lot of effort and thought into that. And that has really helped me to be able to get here and then have those things work well because it is a harsh environment and it's very easy to say, it's dumping snow out right now. I don't want to go jump around in the snow. Like that sounds really dumb. But if I have a space where I know that I can do that and I have the tools that I need to do those things, then it makes it much easier. So it was one of those things where, yeah, foresight was really important. And now that I've done a couple of those lifts, it's like, okay, I've got it. Like I've got a big backpack. I've got some water weights. I've got some ankle weights that I brought, things like that, just enough that I can get all the little exercises that I need. And I think that it helps me feel like I'm, staying strong, staying on top of the injury prevention stuff. And again, like we talked about with the workouts, feeling like I'm actually still making progress from week to week, that I can see, oh, this, I literally just did this today today's Monday here. So, I did my second big lift today. So this lift was a little bit more substantial than last time. And so I'm still feeling like I'm making progress and making gains week to week, which is where I want to be because we are still probably a month out from Everest. So, we do want to still be stacking those gains and those little tiny marginal incremental gains from week to week.
Okay. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you've been able to find some space and all those crazy things we packed up seem to be working out. All right. So now it sounds like you're also testing out some new gear. You had a custom backpack from FSP. So, how important is this notion of gear testing and sort of getting, because it's a very technical sport? I don't think people maybe, I certainly didn't realize how technical it was. So, tell me a little bit about how important that is to test out the equipment and what you're looking for and what you're trying to get ready for your summit attempt.
I think that we talked about this maybe like the last episode in keto of kind of like what's the focus or what's the missing piece of the puzzle basically. Keto was all about fitness. I think it was just getting super 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 fit, and that went really well. And one of the big things about coming to Nepal and having a month to play around in the snow here was exactly what you're talking about. It's getting used to the gear. And even like I said before, it's like getting used to the temperature change, which is relevant to gear because that's what you're wearing, right? That running up Everest and running up Mera Peak here is nothing like running up Ruka Pichincha from a gear perspective. Obviously, from a physiological perspective, there's a lot in common, but in terms of the gear, it is a totally different thing. And as a running which is my sport that I come from, is a very minimalist sport. There's like this kind of purist that all you need is a pair of running shoes and some short shorts and you can go out and run a marathon, you're fine. And I think that there's a like the road runners like look down even on like the trail runners who have our little vests and our poles and water bottles and whatever we have. And then you get to like mountain stuff and suddenly it's like, all right, you got a harness, you got a helmet, you got Jumars and like all this other stuff, lights if you're going in the night. So there's a lot of different stuff. And even in this first week of being here, I've found a lot of things. Like, yes, FSP made me this really cool like little tiny backpack that's going to be my summit backpack, and it's basically a combo of like a running vest, so it has a bunch of pockets and hydration space like for water bottles on the front, and then it's got a pretty big backpack and like space for an ice axe and poles and stuff like that. But it's a very small package, but it packs a punch. So I've been kind of getting used to that and like literally just like, okay, where are the pockets, where are the zippers, how do I put my ice axe on quickly, the like what exactly do I need to bring each day in terms of layers, when do I put sunscreen on, things like that you like, yeah, you really just, it's hard to think of those questions or problems to address before you're actually here. And now again, even just being here for a week, it's like I already have a whole list of things of like, oh, I need to, put a longer zipper pull on this because I can't quite reach it, or things like that. And, the best way to do that is just go out and get your hands dirty and go up the mountain every day. And that's what I've been doing. So yeah, I think it's been super, super important. And as I get into the last month here, I'll have probably one or two longer days where I'll go up even a little bit higher on a different mountain or two. And those will be really good opportunities to test everything, the really cold weather gear, the lights for overnight stuff, the communications devices, things like that, different kinds of boots, different kinds of crampons, all those kinds of things to figure out all that stuff so that by the time we get to Everest, we're not thinking about that at the last minute and scrambling and making decisions. Everything is we've made all the mistakes already, and then we've learned from them and figured out what to do.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I think, yeah, if you can take all of that kind of equipment stuff out of the equation, that really should help then on the summit day. You don't have to think about it too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you sent us pictures and you talked about the two dogs that followed you,
Yeah.
which was very cute. So, in light of that, so what's the strangest experience you've ever had with animals in all of your mountain training?
Gosh, I feel like they're almost all dogs. Yeah, there's a lot of dogs. I remember the very first time actually I came to Nepal, which I talked about on last week's podcast in 2020, and I ran the whole Everest Base Camp trail. That was another one where I had a dog. He probably ran 40 miles or something, that dog. And uh,
Wow.
he was totally fine. It's like, and I've had this experience here in Nepal and on like legit terrain, like we're up the dogs this week, they're on on glaciated snow at 20,000 feet, and they're like just having a ball, and they're totally fine and just romping
Yeah.
around. And like, also in I think it was in Peru. I've had dogs follow me on like very, very long mountain days with like some technical scrambling and stuff, and they're just totally fine. I think it's just like these, and sometimes they end up like really far away, and then they just kind of disappear. And like I assume they find their way back because they're dogs, and like these rural dogs out in the middle of nowhere, whether it's in Peru or in the Himalaya, like I think they're just built a little different than than the golden doodles back in America or whatever. They're a little bit more robust, but
They're certainly acclimated.
yeah, they're certainly acclimated and they're just more independent because like yeah, like I remember another time in Peru, like I did a point to point route. Like I ran from Pisac over this mountain to another town, and this dog came with me all the way. And then like I got on a bus, and then the dog just like I saw the dog like the next day, and he was back in Pisac. So I don't know if he ran back along the road and followed the bus, or if he went back the way we came. But we were 20 miles away, like through a bunch of mountains from where we started, from where this dog's home probably was. And,
Hmm.
this was a normal day for a Peruvian street dog, just hanging out, going for a romp in the mountains and coming home.
Yeah. Yeah. Animals do have remarkable capabilities that we underestimate. I mean, butterflies can find a
Yeah.
single tree literally thousands and thousands of miles away. So, yeah, it's quite remarkable. Okay, great. So now let's look at the week as a whole. So if I summarize everything, you're running up and down the same path every day to get your timed training. You've got the altitude generator work, the cross training, and you've got fingers crossed, double fingers crossed, toes crossed
Yep.
on the altitude generator, and you've got what looks like very good HR adaptation as well, given how much higher you are than you were just a week or two ago. So how is this matched up with what you were hoping, and are you making any adjustments for the coming weeks?
I'd say it, met or exceeded my expectations. I think we talked about before on a previous episode, kind of using my trip to Switzerland back in February as a what's the word, like a trial run for my trip to Nepal. And that was really, really helpful because it allowed me to go into last week's travel week and this first week here with really low expectations, because I remember just coming back to keto after that trip and feeling so wrecked and so terrible. And I was like, oh my God, I lost all my fitness in 3 days. What happened? And so I think coming here, I just had very low expectations, and I was like, you know what? If I get here and I'm just like slogging up the mountain all week and it's really slow and I feel like garbage, like that's the baseline that I'm expecting. And so anything beyond that was, the proverbial icing on the cake, right? And I think I had that. Like I had a good workout. I've, felt pretty good. I've seen, even just in the first week here, just a lot of improvement in terms of going up the same trail and even just on the bike and stuff. So yeah, I think it's been really good. I felt like I've gotten into a really good rhythm, and that's the most important thing. I think the sooner that I could get into a comfortable routine where I felt like I was recovering really well and I was training really well and I was able to get in whatever else I needed to for my life, like that was the number one goal. And I feel like I got there very quickly, like within a few days, and especially now having been here a little over a week. So that was the number one goal. And I feel like that was 100% accomplished. And now I feel really good about the next 3 or 4 weeks that we're going to be here.
Okay. Anything else you want to add? That's the end of my list of questions.
No, I guess, the only thing is, it's just like outrageously beautiful here. And like, I think we've talked about it very clinically of like, oh, this is why we're here, because the altitude and the mountain and this and that, and it's training. And it's also just like even right now it's cleared and I'm looking out my window and it's like the late afternoon, it's about to sunset, and like the direct sunlight is on top of the mountains, and it is so freaking beautiful here. It's like one of the most incredible places I've ever been in my whole life. And like every single day that I go up on Mera, it's, I'm able to see Kanchenjunga, Makalu, Lhotse, Everest. Like that's four of the like five tallest mountains in the world or something. Like I can see those from my training route every single day. It's just totally incredible. So it's a really special place. And I think we're going to talk about that in the cool down a little bit more about just Khare in general. But I wanted to make sure it didn't come off as like, oh, we're just in Khare because it's to here to train. It's like, yes, that is the goal and that is the job, but also it's like, what a wonderful place to be and train. My gosh.
Yeah, yeah, sounds absolutely beautiful, although Spartan.
Yeah, well, Spartan, but you gotta, you get trade-offs, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, let's cut it there and we'll come back for our cool down.
So on our cool down today, let's talk about life in Khare, the remote area in which you are, as we talked about, with Mount Meru. So you've spent a lot of time in the Himalaya at this point over the last 5 or 6 years. What have you learned from your previous expeditions and time there, and how has that helped shape your setup in Khare for this last stage in preparation for Project Himalaya?
The big thing was honestly just setting up in one place. I think one of the ways that people or the way that people usually come and climb these mountains, which is really fun and adventurous, is you hike in and that's all part of the training, right? And so you're never really spending more than a few days in one place until you get to Everest Base Camp or Manaslu Base Camp or whatever it is. And then maybe you're there for 3 or 4 weeks and you can kind of set up shop there. But you usually have like a whole month or even a couple weeks at least of kind of lead in time. And I love that for what it's worth. Like I love the adventure part and seeing all these different places. But I knew from a training perspective, like we've talked about lots of times, I'm a creature of habit, I'm a creature of routine. And I train best when I have a home base setup where I have everything I need and I know exactly what I'm going to do every day. And so that was really the big thing that I learned from Manaslu last year was still we were only on at base camp for I don't know maybe 3 weeks before I did the FKT. But I had a really good setup there and I had a really good training, like little regimen of, going up the trail and up and down the same exact trail every day and then getting on the bike in the afternoon. And so I kind of took that and I took what I had developed as my routine in keto and I was like, okay, how can I take that and set it up here in the rural Himalaya, which was, easier said than done. That was complicated, but I feel like we've now done that. So I think that was really the big thing. At first, it was just following the conventional wisdom of, you hike in, you see the sights, you spend a few days here, you go to this mountain, you go to that mountain, and you're bouncing all over the place. And then finally you go to base camp. And here it was like, okay, I've had a really good training block in keto. And that has been incredibly ritualistic and boring for most people, but it was really fun for me. And how can I just take that and plant it in the Himalaya, recreate that as much as possible while also adapting to, the very unique needs of being in the Himalaya and then setting that up in a place where I can go to Everest really quickly when the window opens. So that's really been the big thing is just, okay, setting up shop here, being in one place.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And it certainly does feel different, I think, from certainly from the first couple of times that you went into the Himalayas. So it sounds like you've learned a lot about this, and it makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense.
And let me add, like, I think a lot of people will criticize some athletes that do this, where it's like you're missing out so much on, a big part of the expedition, which is the hike in and this and that. And I agree with that. I think that that is a really important part of, an adventure, of a trip, of an expedition is the approach coming through, like seeing the valleys and the little towns along the way and getting to meet people and all that stuff. 100%, that is correct. And I completely recognize that in doing what I'm doing of coming directly here, basically from keto, like, I stopped for 24 hours in Massachusetts and 24 hours in Kathmandu, and otherwise I was in transit all the way from keto to Khare. I am missing a lot of that stuff, but it's also, like you framed in that question, it's like, I think I've spent 8 seasons in the Himalaya at this point. I have done all of those things. I've seen those places and I recognize that I'm not doing that this time. And that's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make because this is the way that I can prepare best for what I'm trying to do, which is something that is really, really hard. And like by definition, no one has ever done it before. So like it's going to require doing things differently. So yes, if it were like up to me of pure enjoyment factor of what's the best way to get to Kara, yeah, hiking in here is beautiful. It's incredibly beautiful valley. But also when I think about what's the best way for me to prepare for Everest as a job, which is what that is for me right now, it means okay, getting here and setting up shop and then just doing the same trail every single day.
Yep, yep, makes sense. Okay, so take us through a normal day in Khare, and how is that different than keto? And also, how is it different from the other people who are there, the sort of the regular trucker climber people that are staying at the lodge and going up the mountain?
Yeah, so let me I guess let me walk you through a day. So I usually wake up to the light I don't know, 6:30, something like that, after a solid 12 horizontal hours, as we talked about before. And then I usually spend like at least an hour and a half of just like procrastinating in the morning because it's so cold. Like I wake up and it's, 24 degrees Fahrenheit in my bedroom. And so I bundle up and put on all my layers and I go have some hot coffee and, we'll like respond to some messages because like I'm 12 hours off the United States. So I'll usually have, messages from family and friends and stuff. Maybe do a little writing, do a little reading, take some pictures. It's usually really pretty in the mountain. And then basically the whole rest of the morning is my morning training session. So I'm trying to do usually 3 to 3.5 hours on feet. Again, I always procrastinate of just like getting ready. So even little things of filling up my bottles and getting my gels or whatever, like all that stuff, it just ends up taking more time. I think everything up here takes more time because there's less oxygen. I'll blame it on that. And then, yeah, it's usually maybe 2.5 hours just going up the mountain and getting as high as I can. Sometimes that's the summit. Sometimes it's 6,000, 6,200, something like that. And then that's like kind of the high point of my day, get like literally and figuratively, and then nice easy jog back down. And then I usually have a nice meal here. So that's one of the wonderful things about this little town where I'm staying. There's probably 6 little lodges here, and I've gotten to know the people. They take really good care of me, and so I come back in and have some dalbat, which is just rice and lentils and some curry. Basically, it's a really classic thing here in Nepal. Maybe some soup if it's really cold, and rest a little, do some writing in the afternoon, and then I'll get on the bike, the hypoxic bike, for usually an hour and a half in the afternoon, and then usually do some stretching, some kind of strength, like light strength or mobility after that. And then at that point, it's pretty much dinner time. It's a pretty much full-time job when you factor in all the procrastinating. So yeah, evenings I'll sometimes chit chat with some other people, climbers coming through the lodge and stuff. And otherwise, yeah, getting horizontal around sunset and again, doing some reading and writing and enjoying a lot of time for recovery there. So that's my day. The other part of the question about how is it different from a normal person's day? Well, like with the first question, most people are here as a stepping stone for going to the summit of Mera Peak. And for a lot of people, that's a multi-day project. So if they're here in Khare with where I am, a lot of the time this is like a rest day for them. So we have like a really beautiful little glass enclosed kind of porch area that gets warm with the afternoon sun. So a lot of people are just kind of sitting in there chit-chatting. A lot of people in the morning are getting ready to go up to high camp, and then from high camp they'll make their summit bid the next day. So I feel like there's a lot of kind of like nervous energy sometimes because you have all these climbers and they're like getting ready for this big thing. It's like really intense, and it's really fun to talk to people. And then the other energy is the people who just came down, who are like all like stoked and confident because they just climbed this big mountain and they're like really excited to talk about it and stuff. So, yeah, it's I would say my lifestyle is probably pretty different from the average person coming through here. But yeah, it's been really fun getting to know people. I think we talk about that a little bit later on in the questions here.
Yeah, nice. So tell us a little bit more about the accommodations. We talked about the fact that there's no heat there, and you just mentioned it's 24 degrees in your room. And in fact, looking at you now, you're dressed in your parka with your hat on. So it's clearly cold.
Yep.
And you sent us tons of pictures showing us all the snow and the mountains and everything. So beyond the heating, what other kinds of comforts are you missing? How Spartan is it?
Well, like we were saying offline before we started recording, we do not have sit down toilets here. That's a big one. We have squatty potties, which for those of you guys who have never had the privilege, a squatty potty is anything from basically just a hole in a piece of plywood um, to what we have here is actually I guess I'll put a picture somewhere on Instagram or something, but it's actually a porcelain thing with little foot places where you put your feet, and then there's kind of a little dish almost in the middle with a hole that goes down, to wherever it goes. So it's good for your ankle and hip mobility, I would say, but it's definitely a little bit less comfortable and a little bit chilly sometimes first thing in the morning. So that's definitely something. And then I would say electricity is the other big thing that can be tricky, and connectivity in general. I enjoy being disconnected. Like I've been very plugged from social media and stuff like that, and kind of keeping my close family friend circle appraised of everything that's going on here. And that's been really nice to be able to have kind of just enough connectivity to keep in touch with the people who I really care about. That's been great. But at the same time, yeah, like every once in a while, it's like I was trying to book a flight the other day and it kept crashing. It's like, oh gosh, come on. But then it's also like, come on, dude, look at where we are. Like the fact that I can do any of that stuff and like be in touch with my family and like do a video call with my dad is like incredible. So it's all good.
Indeed. Okay. So a Spartan lifestyle for those working on the high mountains. In
Yeah.
Quito, you had a big community. You had other athletes, you had friends, you had Ryan and Sarah Hall come visit. Do you
Yeah.
feel loneliness there where you are now, or have you made friends and connections out there?
I mean, the good news is not yet. I think it's all felt, new and exciting enough that I haven't like I just described those days. Like my days somehow still feel pretty full. I think like when I left keto, I was like, oh yeah, like I have like an hour a day that I'm in the car basically, like going back and forth to the mountain. Like I'm gonna get an extra hour. And then really it's like I just spent an extra hour sleeping because I'm 2,000 meters higher and that's what my body needs. So my days feel just as full as they did in keto, and it's like we were just talking about. It's great to be able to stay, a little bit in touch with friends and stuff from home, and then in terms of meeting people here, it's been fun. Yeah, just like there's a constant stream of people, and it's funny because I'll see a climbing party of like I don't know 6 friends or something who are here. In Khare in the lodge, and then tomorrow I'll see them hiking up to high camp, and then the next day I'll see them hiking down from high camp, like all these days like when I'm going up and down the mountain, and then the next day they'll be back here in Kare like in the lodge again. So it's like I see the same people over and over again, and like some of them have chit chatted, especially because like what I'm doing is pretty clearly not normal, and so that
Uh-huh.
raises some eyebrows. And so yeah, I've had some interesting conversations and stuff. But the other part of it is, I do have other people who are coming here, which is really exciting. So my climbing partner Chris Fisher and his partner Aaron Tunn are actually in the Kumbu. Like as the crow flies, they're like literally on the other side of that mountain right now. But again, it's like one of those you can't get there from here. So they're both very close and very far away. And Chris is coming here to Kare in a week or two to train and hang out a little bit, and then we'll go to Everest together. And then my very good friend David Wilder as well is actually coming out, I think, next week. So that'll be fun to have some familiar faces as stuff starts to maybe get a little bit more tedious or boring or repetitive. But honestly, I'm not too worried about that.
Okay. Sounds good. And so you've shown us lots of photos, sent us lots of photos of the beautiful environment in Kare. It looks pretty harsh. What's the one thing or more than one thing? What are the most challenging things you didn't expect or anticipate? And how are you adjusting and adapting?
The most challenging things I didn't anticipate. That's a good question. Honestly, I feel like I kind of knew what I was getting into. I'm not sure there were any like really big surprises. I think how cold it was, we've talked about a couple times. I think that was just like a little bit of a shock to the system. It's one thing to remember like, oh, it's cold there. And then it's another thing to, be sleeping in a, -40 sleeping bag in a parka, like every single night. And so I think that's probably the only thing that I would say is like harder than I maybe gave it credit for ahead of time. But it's not like I didn't expect it. Like I knew it. I just like kind of probably downplayed it in my mind a little bit. I think that's really it. And also just like it's been very snowy the last week. I don't know if that's totally normal for this time. I think it's actually really good because the Himalaya had a very dry winter. All the mountains are super dry up high, which is good and bad. It means they're icy. It means there's more rock. It means there's probably less potential for avalanche, which is a good thing when there's less snow. But it can make the climbing a little bit trickier. And I think yeah, having just these small storms that have come through this week, I think it's a good thing.
Okay. All right. So we talked a little bit about communication with the outside world. Just expand on that a little bit about how being so far away and with so many things lacking in terms of electricity, connectivity, et cetera, how does that affect your ability to communicate with the outside world, both personal connections and for your professional obligations for Chosky and your sponsors and such?
Mostly, I'm incredibly lucky because I have a incredible team of people that help me manage my life. So I tried hard to set all this stuff up ahead of time because again, it's not my first rodeo here, and I knew that I was going to be just training a lot and really tired. And like we talked about, everything just takes more energy up here, physically and mentally. And I knew that the more that I can front load that and delegate stuff ahead of time and set up these teams of people to support me before I get here, the easier my life will be and the better I'll be able to focus on training and the project and everything like that. So that's the number one, is just like, no man is an island, and I may be here by myself in the middle of the Himalaya, but I have this incredible team of people, like I've talked about Jim Corville, my agent, Kat and Jason Anderson, who do all of our social media and editing and stuff like that, Jay and Brian at Chosky. So like I've really found some incredibly fantastic people to help do all of the kind of work obligations that I knew would be hard to deal with. And even you guys helping me with like my Amazon returns and stuff. Like literally, there's so many
Yep.
people in my life. Like if I didn't have all of those people, I don't know what I would do. Like literally today, Connor and I were like texting about trying to find like a timer app that would like notify, but it's not that interesting. But like, I've got Connor back on his couch in Waltham, like helping me figure out like Android app stuff, so it really is just, it takes a village, and it's a cliche, but there's a lot of truth in it. And I'm just so grateful for all the people in my corner, and whether they're literally here in Nepal with me right now or all over the world, they've made my life feasible. It's just like would be completely impossible without all of them. So yes, I'm grateful for the satellite internet, who provider name I will not give any credit to, but that's been great. But at the same time, it's more important to have these people around the world who I trust and who are just doing such a fantastic job of, helping me keep my life together, literally.
Okay, great. So I'm very curious, and you mentioned a little bit about the other people going up and down the mountain, but it's a very popular, as you said, trekking peak for a lot of people. It's a lower peak and a training peak maybe for people getting ready for bigger mountains. So how have the other climbers and trekkers reacted to seeing you repeatedly running up and down the mountain every day?
Yeah, so there's two different kinds of people. So there's a Sherpa who work here and are up and down the mountain every day themselves. And then there's the clients, the foreign climbers who are coming here. A lot of the time, it's maybe their first big peak, maybe their first time on snow, things like that. So the Sherpa, I think, figured out pretty quickly that like, oh, there's this kid in town who's just like running up and down the mountain every day. And they're super like, I've befriended a bunch of them, and like we'll like fist bump and they'll be like, hey, it's the runner guy. Like, now it's they all, because like I wear the same clothes every day. So they know who I am. It's really easy to spot me. And I'm also the only guy running for the most part.
Yep.
So there's this fun kind of camaraderie there, because like those guys work so hard. Like what I'm doing is unique, and I'm moving quickly, but I'm not carrying hardly anything. These guys are hauling loads. Like they have like two giant duffel bags on their back. I saw a guy today with like a full size like stove, like a burner, like a one burner stove with a propane tank on his back, and a basket, like literally a
Wow.
basket on his back with a stove in it. It must have weighed like 60 pounds. So these guys are just working so freaking hard. So I think there's like a really cool, just kind of mutual respect there between us, of like seeing, hey, you guys are working really hard. And I think they see that I'm working pretty hard too a lot of the time. And that's really cool. And then on the other side, you have the clients, and mostly I think I get confusion from them. Just like, what is going on? Like, what on earth is this guy doing? And I will say, like, I try to be very cognizant of the fact that I'm super comfortable out there. This is my backyard at this point, and there are a lot of people for whom it's their first time walking on unbalanced rocks and snow. So I always try to give those people the right of way, and like I try to go out of the way and around, and let people know if I'm coming through. I've seen other athletes, um, whether it's in trail running or in the mountains, where there's a sense of entitlement that, oh, because I'm faster than you, that I have more of a right to be here. And that's always rubbed me the wrong way. It's like they have just as much of a right to be on the mountain as me. It's like one of the big questions we get about the Everest project is like, oh, do you get to shut down the whole mountain and run up by yourself? It's like, no, we have no more of a right to be on the mountain than any of the other climbers. We paid our permits just like they did, and they have just as much of a right to be here as we do. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, is like, we're all in this space together. And so I try to give those people a lot of space usually. Like I can tell if someone's like a little nervous on the terrain or something, and I'll give them a really wide berth and let them know I'm coming and things like that. And honestly, like everybody has been super nice. Like I don't usually get a ton of people who like talk to me because I'm going by kind of quickly on the mountain, but a lot of the time, in the lodge, like people will come up to me and be like, what's your deal? Like, who are you? Like, what are you doing here?
What are
Like,
you
especially
doing?
because my
Yes.
the bike and the or altitude mask setup is like kind of off in a corner in the common area. So like I'm literally like a sideshow in the afternoons there, where like everybody is just like sitting there having their like afternoon latte or whatever. And then I like put on this mask and I'm just like biking over in the corner by myself. And I was like, what are you like? Why do you need more exercise? What are you doing? You know? But no, it's definitely spawned some interesting conversations. I've gotten to know some people here, and yeah, everybody who's come up to me has been super kind uh, and encouraging, and yeah, it's been really fun just getting to meet people. Like it's so cool, like seeing some of these people who are literally like on their first 6,000 or their first glaciated peak and learning to put their crampons on and stuff. So it's really cool to meet people in that situation, and yeah, kind of see that they're falling in love with the mountains like right now. It's really cool.
Great. Great. Okay. That's it for me. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's a good place to leave it. Again, like I'll kind of sign off with the same thing I said before. It's like, Khare has definitely started to feel a little bit like home over the last week, and it's definitely, it's a home office, I would say. Like there's a lot of work that I'm doing here, but it's also just one of the most beautiful places on earth. I think for anyone who's ever in this region, if you're coming to Everest Base Camp, it's definitely a little bit out of the way, and I think that's a good thing. It's less crowded than the whole Everest Base Camp trail kind of highway section that's all in the Khumbu, but it is so beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful valleys, and Mera is one of the most beautiful mountains I've ever been on. And yeah, I'd 100% encourage anybody in Nepal to make the trip out here, spend that extra week, and come check this place out. It's really unbelievably beautiful.
Okay. So check it out
Excellent.
if you get the chance and you're in the area. All right. Read us
Definitely.
out then, sir.
All right, I will read us out, guys. Thank you for this is our first live episode from Nepal/Massachusetts. Hopefully, this all worked, and we'll get it all to you guys in the next week. Please send any feedback, your questions, comments, concerns, hopes, dreams. You can send those to me, ty@chosky.run, or DM me, Tyler C. Andrews, on Instagram. Remember, you can also read my raw training logs. This is all multimedia. That's at tylercandrews.com. Click on the blog, and that'll take you over to Substack. Lastly, this is a Chosky Media production brought to you by Chosky Endurance Collective, the world's leader in online coaching, community, and travel for endurance athletes. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will talk to you next week. Ciao.